Hey YouTube, Jessica Jones here with another video titled The List of No-Win Scenarios and Contradictions with Narcissists. The video outline is as follows. Number 1, no-win scenarios and double bind introduction. Number 2, the list of double binds and no-win scenarios. Number 3, narcissistic parents no-win messages. Number 4, false accusations with unstated assumptions. 5, differences with non-disordered people. 6, the result of double binds. And 7, what to do. So, a no-win scenario occurs when no matter what choice you make, you are going to be harmed, punished, or feel pain because you cannot please the abuser. So basically the abuser is going to give you two choices. It's going to be maybe a false choice, like A or B. And if you do A or B, you're going to feel pain no matter what. But it's going to look like if you do either of them, there may be a possibility of them giving you approval, but that's not the case. They're going to say they will, but it's not. And so, like they would say, if you do A, I'll approve of you. But when you do A, they punish you. So it's like, no matter what choice you take, you're going to be punished, you're going to be blamed, and you're going to be insulted. So you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. It's kind of similar to a double bind, which is like two conflicting demands placed on a person. So if the person does either course of action, they will be punished. And the person receives contradictory messages verbally and behaviorally, and they can't speak up about it without being punished, and they can't leave, so they're trapped. So this is because human communication involves verbal and nonverbal cues. Like when I'm talking to you, there is like I'm using the words, but also if you could see me, which you can't, you would notice like my body language, and also tone of voice is also another layer of communication. For example, if someone says, I love you, the words can be sincere, it can be manipulative, it can be a joke, it can be sarcastic or insincere, or it can even convey hate, given the certain context and tone of voice. So, an example of a double bind is when the verbal does not match the tone and body language or behavior. For example, so as your abuser, I can say, I care about your career and I'll do anything to support you. But when you take courses to enhance your career, I'm going to keep nagging you and punishing you and saying like, why are you taking the courses? Or I'm going to ask you to kind of stay home more and put more demands on you at home so that you can't juggle your demanding prestigious job and all your home responsibilities that I'm kind of asking you to do, and I'm also asking you to spend more time with me, and I'm also punishing you. And so verbally I'm saying one thing, which is I support your career, I'll do anything. And behaviorally I'm doing another thing, which is I'm getting you to quit graduate school, preventing you from taking courses, trying to get you fired from your job, maybe through sleep deprivation or constantly fighting with you or punishing you every time you come home. And if you point out this contradiction, as your abuser, I'll rage at you, I'll deny what happened, I'll topic switch, I'll do a false accusation so you'll be confused and you're defending yourself now. So that's an example of like a double bind. So here's a hypothetical. If you were at a stoplight and you saw a police officer and the lights turn red and green at the same time, what would you do? Because it's confusing, it's contradictory. Red means stop, green means go. So what's the right move here? Well, people experience cognitive dissonance. It's a state of having inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes. Some people may feel frustrated, others may freeze, and this is the type of situation the abuser puts you in all the time to keep you confused. The traffic light example is an analogy for cognitive dissonance. It's when you receive contradictory messages and you don't know what to do. And that was what the abuser kind of does to you. No matter what you do for them, you're wrong. They said that you have wronged them, and some of them may even say that now you owe them, and you're almost in debt slavery now. So, social scientist Gregory Bateson came up with a theory about double binds. He says that double binds may be the causal factor for schizophrenia and maybe even borderline personality disorder. Now, his work is interesting, and I think a lot of research on that mental illness has not gone in that direction. So his theory is not necessarily widely accepted in the academic community, but some psychotherapists find it useful and think that there needs to be more research in his direction. In my personal experience, I've had two narcissistic friends whose family was headed by a narcissistic matriarch grandmother, and they had 2 out of the 6 adult children that were schizophrenic in one family, and 2 out of 5 adult children that were schizophrenic in another. So the grandmas in both families often put their children in no-win scenarios and double binds. I don't know if putting people in double binds will cause them to become schizophrenic, but I do know that it is often infuriating, and it kind of does make you go crazy in some ways. So being unpleasable is abusive, because if you are in an attachment relationship with someone, you want to give and receive understanding, approval, and kindness. And when your loved one or abuser is perpetually dissatisfied with all your efforts to make them happy, that is abusive, because it's going to keep you stuck in a hamster wheel, trying to spend all your energy trying to please them. You are ignoring your own needs and wants in life and goals, and you're kind of making your life revolve around the abuser's agenda. And they're kind of intentionally doing this because they don't want to give you kindness, respect, and approval, because it's easier to control your behavior. Whereas if you would have received this good treatment and love from a non-disordered person if you had an attachment relationship with them, because it's actually regular human behavior to love our loved one and make their happiness part of our own. However, with a pathological predator, your relationship is a zero-sum game in which you're the loser and they must be the winner. Both of you can't be the winners. There's no win-win scenario in their head. So here's a list of crazy-making, no-win scenarios and double binds. My dad, mom, brother, friends, and ex-boyfriend did the majority of these things to me, and it took me years to figure out. Doing a few things on this list does not make a person a narcissist or a personality disorder person, but abusers will do a lot of these things that I list out. So we're going to role play, and I'm going to be your hypothetical abuser for the list below. So as your abuser, I'm going to contradict myself verbally. Other times I'm going to say I want one thing and behave like I want the opposite thing. That's confusing, and the goal is to make you feel terrible about yourself so that you feel lots of emotional pain, so you're stuck in confusion, so you're always trying to please me. So this may psychologically trigger you because some of these things may have happened to you. And if it has, I'm truly sorry, because it really hurts. I've been there. So writing these things out actually made me feel really upset. It took me years to process the years of manipulation to kind of make sense of it, and I want to prevent it from happening to me again. So, number 1, if you make any small mistake, you are a terrible person, and I will non-stop blame and criticize you. So, if I do this, that's also, it's a double bind, because human beings are flawed and everyone makes mistakes. So I'm trying to make you feel bad for being merely human. So the end result is that you feel bad for your existence, for breathing air. Number 2, I'm going to say, you're so terrible. You're either the worst child, parent, or partner in the world. I dislike and hate you. So I'm going to say that to you. And then I'm also going to say to you later on, I need you to stay. Nobody will help me. Only you're the only one who understands me. You're so wonderful. So those are contradictory messages. Or I could behave like I want you to help me and say that I want you to stay around, otherwise I'll kill myself and I'm going to threaten suicide. So that's what a lot of malignant borderlines do. Like, they kind of put you up on a pedestal and then say like you're the best thing in the world, and then kind of maybe in the same minute they might say you're the scum of the earth, or maybe they might do that the same day. So it's kind of the I hate you, don't leave me dynamic, and the result is you're going to live in fear, walk on eggshells all the time, and so basically you're going to live your whole life trying to not get this person to get psychologically triggered for whatever reason. And if I'm the abuser, well, especially malignant borderlines, they kind of get triggered over nothing, and you're like, okay, I don't know. And then when they get triggered, they start like raging and destroying you and doing nonstop for hours. It's pretty scary. So when they're doing that, they have successfully kind of controlled your behavior. And so whatever move you make, you're going to be labeled as all bad and then all good sometimes. So that's pretty confusing. Number 3, I'll ask as your abuser, how come you don't have that many friends? I'm going to accuse you of, you spend too much time alone. And then when you do go out with friends, I'm going to say, why are you always going out with your friends? You hate me. So the game being played here is a rejection of you, to establish you as a loser in every scenario, no matter what action you take. And maybe you were unaware of this. I certainly was. Like, I spent a decade just trying to please my family, and they were doing this to me, and I was a loser in every single scenario, no matter what I did. And then I thought I could win their approval if I just took this course of action, and then I failed because it was just all lies. As your abuser, in this hypothetical example, I could take it a step further and brainwash you and say, oh, I love you so much, and your best friends, like, they really don't like you, they're bad news, they're bringing you down. Or I might say, oh, that coworker you have, she's really jealous of you, she's actually like really harmful to be around. And so basically it looks like I'm showing concern and care, but basically I'm trying to isolate you from other people, and I'm using the excuse of love and concern to basically control your behavior and sabotage you, which is really, it's a layer of brainwashing that's pretty evil. So every time you spend time with either your coworkers or your friends, as your abuser, I might punish you with silent treatments or etc. And so that way, even though I say I love you and I'm helping you, I'm actually kind of working for your downfall. I'm working to isolate you, destroy your relationships. Number 5, I'm going to accuse you of saying, you need to spend more time with me. And then maybe later on, I'll just say, why are you so clingy and dependent on me? It's kind of disgusting. Or every time you spend time with me, I'll say, I'll spend the whole time criticizing you and hurting you emotionally. Or maybe I'll take as much time as I can away from your hobbies by kind of nagging you every time you do your hobby. And then after I successfully got you to get rid of your hobbies, I'm going to say, you're so boring. How come you have no hobbies? So no matter how much time you spend with me or not, as your abuser, I'm going to find a way to have contempt for you. Number 6, as your abuser, I'm going to say, oh, you need to be happy because you're just so depressed. You're such a Debbie Downer. You're so negative and you're so terrible to be around. Nobody likes your energy. But as your abuser, when you're happy and joyous, I'll punish you. So you're conditioned to never feel good about yourself around me. You'll be conditioned never to show happiness or smile. And number 2, I might be working hard to make you feel negative emotions by constantly insulting you, neglecting your needs, and then I'll blame you, how come you're not happy? And I might even triangulate you or compare you with another person saying, hey, Sean is really happy, how come you can't be happy? So if you feel any emotion, or if you just exist as a human being, so that's a problem. And you have to know that your existence is plain wrong. And I'm going to work really hard as your abuser to make you believe that. So if you can see this stuff and the contradictions, it's really infuriating. So I can see how victims like explode with rage, because this is what abusers do. It's like very similar to emotional torture. I just said you should, I'm working for your downfall. I'm working to sabotage you. I'm saying that I love you. And then I'm blaming you for all the actions that I'm taking while I'm hurting you emotionally. It's just layers of crazy making. Number 7, I'll accuse you and say, how come you never help me with my problems? And then when you intervene, I'll never take any of your suggestions and I'll insult you every time you try to help me. So that's crazy making. And if you try to help me, I'll just call you super controlling. So if you try to help me or not, no matter what action you take, I'm just going to be pissed off and offended and I'm going to call you names. So another layer of crazy making is that when you do help me as your abuser, I'm going to accuse you of wanting to sabotage me by offering bad suggestions. So that's actually ascribing malicious intention. So there's too many things going on. There's contradictions and then ascribing malicious intention. I think you can layer multiple manipulation tactics on top of each other. It's like this crazy sandwich and it just keeps on going forever, and then your brain just wants to explode with confusion and rage. It's insane. So number 8, I'll accuse you as your abuser. I'll say, you never prioritize family. You should live near me. You're hurting me so much because you live so far away. Everyone else loves their family except you. That's a shaming tactic to control you. And then when you actually do move near me, you put all this time and energy, I'm going to accuse you of being oh, you're parasitic off of me, you're not independent enough, and you rely too much on family. You see how it's like contradictory? And then I'm going to say, oh, how come you're not more successful? You're a lazy failure and parasite who wants to leech off their family. The thing is, so if you really wanted to be successful, I think successful people prioritize their family, but they don't prioritize necessarily living like right next to their family. And they have to pursue other things about success. Anyways, here's another layer of crazy making. As your abuser, I'll tell people that you moved near me because you wanted to leech off of me. So that's the beginning part of the decade-long smear campaign I'm going to plot against you. And so no matter what you do, you'll be shamed and you'll be subject to a guilt trip. Do you see how crazy making that is? So basically, I guilt tripped you and I shamed you to move near me, and then when you do, I'm going to accuse you of not being independent and tell everyone that you're just trying to be a parasite. Anyways, this is exactly what happened to me. My mother did this to me. I just didn't even realize this was going on, and the layers of sabotage and evil was just so ongoing. I was like, oh my god, this woman's like an extreme dark triad. I didn't know she was beginning the smear campaign ever since I was little. There's nothing I could do. I basically don't even say much to my extended family. They think the worst of me, and I don't know. I think that's a successful smear campaign. Good thing I don't have a relationship with them. Number 9. As your abuser, I'll say, why don't you make more money? You never make enough money for me. And then later on, I'll say, you work too much and you never spend any time with me. You're neglecting me. So that's kind of hard, and it puts you between a rock and a hard place, because making more money requires time and sacrifice to get better education, and you have to work longer hours and spend longer hours honing your skill set. But I'll complain, so no matter what, I'm bitching at you, and you'll never get any peace. Or, behaviorally, I may sabotage your job by fighting with you before bed. I'll prevent you from going to grad school. I'll criticize you all the time if you try to build your skill set or get more education. I'm going to discourage that at every turn. When you work longer hours, I'm going to punish you with silent treatments. I'm going to constantly tell you to quit your high-paying job because the commute is long. You never spend any time with me. So no matter what you do, you're just going to feel bad. Like, I think that's the goal. Number 10, I'll say, you never spend enough money. You keep spending so much money and you never save. And then when you save money, I'm going to say, you're just greedy. How come you're hoarding all this money? So no matter what you do with regards to money, I'm going to try to make you feel horrible about it as your abuser. So it's kind of a no-win scenario. You have this negative label I ascribe to you permanently, which is greedy. And whether you spend money, whether you make enough or don't make enough, it's just you're always going to constantly feel shame. You're constantly going to feel guilt about it. Number 12. So this is applying to women. I'll say, good mothers should quit their job and stay at home and do all the housework and take care of the children. And then later on, I'll say, how come you don't have a job? You're leeching off of your mother. You're lazy. You're taking care of children is easy, and you actually have no hard work to do. So whether you have a job or you don't have a job, you can't make a single move without criticism. And so what victims do is like they kind of make a huge action to please their abuser, and then the abuser switches it on them and said, you're stupid, I never said that, they deny they ever asked you that, they gaslight you, and then you're kind of left with all these horrible life decisions because of the abuser, and then they blame it on you, which is basically at their brainwashing, at their shaming, at when they guilt tripped you, they're trying to coerce you psychologically to do these things. Number 13, I'll say, how come you don't dress better? You dress like a slob compared to Sean or Christine. And then when you do dress better, I'll say, how come you're trying to get so much attention from the opposite sex? Huh? How come you're trying to act like a player? Or how come you're like dressing like a slut and a whore? So this is kind of a no-win scenario. No matter how you dress, you're going to be demeaned. Even after you expended all this time and energy to appease the abuser, you can't make a step without being criticized. Number 14, as your hypothetical abuser, I will say, you need to lose weight. You're so fat. It's disgusting. And as your abuser, behaviorally, it's going to be different, because I'm going to say, hey, you need to finish your food. You need to clean your plate. So basically here, I'm forcing you to ignore your satiety signals and demanding that you eat more food. But then I'm also going to tell you to lose weight. And those are contradictory things. And eating mindfully to like 80% is a better eating habit for weight loss. Another thing I can do to sabotage you is I'll keep buying all your favorite sugary, fatty foods and place it around the house. And so, like, that is me tempting you and creating an environment that will sabotage your goals of weight loss, which I told you to do. And so, when you do give in to this temptation, I'm going to say, hey, you're terrible. You lack self-control and discipline. So, that's one other way of sabotage. Or maybe, as your partner, I'll want to only eat out at unhealthy restaurants. So, the environment is a factor in shaping decision making. So, if you have junk food out of the house, that really helps with self-control, but I'm just going to keep blaming you for lacking willpower, when in actuality, it's a universal human trait that if the environment is tempting, people will succumb to temptations. Willpower is a finite resource, according to like some research. So basically that's an example of me telling you to lose weight and then behaviorally or verbally acting like you need to gain weight. That's confusing. It makes people go nuts. Or here's another example. I'll say, now you're too skinny. How come you don't eat more? I think it looks kind of gross that you're too skinny. So no matter what size you are, you'll never win my approval as your abuser, because they always want you to be in the perpetual one-down position, perpetually have low self-esteem, and internalize it so you don't leave. Because then that way they can use you as much as they want and then discard you when you're no longer useful. And that mainly pertains to romantic relationships. Number 15, whenever you try to eat healthy, weight train, or run, I'll make fun of you or complain that you're not spending enough time with me. Okay, so let's say that. And then, for example, if you do have a fit body, I'll complain that you're just trying to show off. And if you don't have a fit body, I'm going to say, you're just so fat, you're embarrassing me. And so if you do hit your goal of being healthy, I'll accuse you of being vain and trying to attract all this attention and, oh my God, you're trying to cheat on me, aren't you? And so no matter what you do with regards to your weight, if you try to be healthy, you try to be fit, not be fit, it's a lose-lose situation. Number 16, as your abuser, I'll say, how come you don't share anything with me in conversations? You never talk. It's kind of really boring. And then every time you do open your mouth, I'll interrupt you, or I'll talk over you, or I'll just insult you, or I'll ignore what you say, or I'll punish you by reacting, by screaming and shouting. So basically, it's like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Or I might say, you talk too much and people don't like it. So that's a lose-lose situation. If you're talking or if you're not talking, you're losing, no matter what. And here's something that like my brother would do to me. Prior to meeting all his friends, he would like secretly say to me that all my friends dislike you and they think you're like terrible and a spoiled brat. And so when I met them, I was actually awkward. So he actually induced social awkwardness by telling me all of these awful things that people believed about me, which is false. Or he, maybe they did believe that about me, but he kind of did a smear campaign by saying I was all those awful things to them. And do you see how he kind of engineered where I would be socially awkward and then kind of internalize that and believe that I was in a lot of social situations? I didn't know, like, he was basically screwing with my mind the whole time. Number 17, as your abuser, I'll say, how come you're not more vulnerable with me? You're like a closed book and you don't let me in. What's wrong with you? And so every time you do actually share a vulnerability, I'll make sure to use it against you. I'll hurt you. So whether you share or you don't share, I'll be pissed at you. So I think this is an example of a no-win situation that kind of occurs naturally within human relationships, because research professor Brene Brown said that in a talk, women want men to be more vulnerable, but sometimes they don't know how to handle the male vulnerability. Maybe it scares them, maybe they just can't handle it. And psychology professor Jordan Peterson said that women are sexually attracted to strong, dangerous men on average. And so maybe it's a balance of strong and sensitive, and too much of one trait is going to be attractive. So maybe it's a happy median. I think naturally within human relationships, double binds can occur, because I think humans are complicated and they want a lot of contradictory things. Like for example, let's take a trait of jealousy. So a lot of people, they want their partner to be jealous, but not too jealous. If you're too jealous, you're too controlling. If you're not jealous enough, you don't care enough. So it's somewhere in the middle. And I'm going to go through how regular people sometimes put others in double binds, and it's not the same way that abusers do it. when an abuser is doing it, first of all, they do put you in lose-lose situations across the board. It's everywhere. For me, it was like my weight, my career, everything. Like, I just would just be a constant fuck up, and that's how they labeled me. That wasn't true. They're kind of delusional, detached from reality, and they never believed that because they put all these responsibilities on me. If they really think that I was a screw-up, then they wouldn't constantly be asking me to do all of their responsibilities for them all the time. They would know and not ask me to do it. Anyways, so number 18, as your abuser, I'll say, you never help with any housework. But every time you do help, I'll say, you're doing this wrong. I'm going to correct every single one of your behaviors and say it's a mistake. And so basically, even though I'm your partner, I'm going to be your parent and you're going to be like the bad child role. And I'm always going to be correcting you. So whether you help me out or not, I'm going to be bitching at you. And so that's a lose-lose situation. Number 19, I'll say, as your hypothetical abuser, I'll say, you didn't socialize with anyone at the party. You're so weird. But when you do socialize with people, I'll ask, how come you're talking to him or her? Why were you flirting? Are you trying to cheat on me? So no matter what you do at a party, I'm going to be dissatisfied with you. Number 20, I'll say, I love you and I care about you so much. But behaviorally, it's going to be different from what I say verbally, because I'll invalidate your feelings, I'll disregard your needs, I'll deprive you of attention, I'll call you names, I'll barely show you any approval, criticize you every day, blame you for things that are actually my fault, and then I'll give you a small gift or some flattery here and there so you're still brainwashed into thinking that I love you. So here, whatever I say does not match my behavior. That's similar to the cognitive dissonance example I gave, where you have two contradictory signals. It's like a red light and a green light. And you're like, do you stop or do you go? Your brain explodes, okay? Number 21. If you don't agree to my delusional interpretations of events, you'll be punished. And this is me being your abuser. And so the implication is that if you perceive reality correctly, if you call out the reality that, hey, the situation's unfair, I'm treating you unfairly, I'm going to punish you, I'm going to rage at you, I'm going to say, no, you're wrong, and I'm the best, and you're actually wrong about everything. So, fine, if we fight and then I get you to agree with me, which is the abuser's version of events, then you're going to be more mentally ill and detached from reality as it is. The reality is, look, I'm abusing you, I'm pathologically lying, it's an unfair relationship, there's double standards, it's parasitic, I'm basically monopolizing on all your time and not contributing. That's the truth of the situation. But you're not allowed to say that. If you say that, I'm going to abuse you more. And so, because you're not allowed to say stuff, and I'm going to try to force you to think the way that I do, you're going to become more mentally ill because you're detached from reality. That's crazy. And so being healthy means that you interpret reality as it is. So if someone's being abusive, you need to at least understand the truth of the situation so that you're not crazy. But if you call out the abuser's bad behavior, they punish you with more abuse. If you're silent, then you're almost kind of, and if you agree to the abuser's reality, they kind of reward you. It's like, when you agree to my reality, I'm going to stop abusing you. Maybe I'll say like, oh, you're so awesome, I love you. Do you see that? I'm conditioning you in opposite ways. I'm trying to get you to believe my version of warped reality, and you become crazier and crazier, and that's bad for you. So no matter what you do, it's actually bad. If you don't agree with me, I punish you. If you're actually mentally sane and you call out the situation as it is, then you're going to be abused. Lose-lose situation no matter what. So number 22, as your abuser, I'm going to expect you to read my mind. Now, that's an impossibility because you're not Professor X from X-Men, and you probably don't have supernatural powers at this point. And so, if you don't read my mind, I'll punish you. I'm expecting you to do something impossible, and you're not doing it, so I'm going to harm you, and maybe you'll feel bad, and then maybe you might internalize low self-esteem, thinking like, why are you such a screw-up? Well, I guess that's what the abuser wants from you. Number 23, I'm going to say your feelings are wrong. So, it's a double bind because if you feel your feelings, which is healthy, that's the right thing to do, by the way, then you're going to be wrong and I'm going to punish you and abuse you. So, if you deny your feelings, personally and internally, that's painful and actually that's unhealthy. And you're not living in reality, because the reality is you have these feelings inside, they're kind of signals for you to explore what's going on, and you're not being punished. So, no matter what you do in regards to your feelings, you'll be harmed. That's a double bind. That's a no-win situation. Number 24, you are expected to do impossible things. So, as your abuser, I'm going to be constantly setting up impossible expectations that definitely lead you to failure. And then when you do fail, I'm going to make you internalize that you are a failure and you're not good at anything. And you'll internalize permanently low self-esteem until, the abuser gets annoyed and then they discard you. So, yeah, that's really terrible. Number 25, as your abuser, I'll tell you to do something, like buy a car. And then when you do the thing that I asked, I'll punish you and say, why did you do that? You're so stupid. So that is kind of a no-win situation I put you in to get a power trip over you so that you feel bad. And other abusers may even gaslight you. For example, they tell you to do something, and then later on they deny that they ever asked you to do that. That's crazy. So whatever you do, it's a no-win scenario. If you don't do it, I'll bitch at you forever. If you do it, I'm gonna deny ever asking you to do that, or I'll say that you're stupid for doing it. That stuff was always done to me by actually all three of them. It was crazy. So not only that, but in addition to that, there's other layers of crazy making on top of the double bind, which is like a smear campaign, or there's deep brainwashing. Because while they're asking you to do it, they're actually telling other people you want to do that because you want to hurt them. So these are layers upon layers of lies and crazy making. And this kind of shows that for a lot of predators, especially the ones I dealt with, which are dark triad, they are aware, they're intentional. This manipulation ploy takes years to do. They know how to act in public and they act differently in private. So there is some degree of intentionality and awareness, regardless of what other people say. Another thing is that other people have different predators. For example, one person may have a person with narcissistic traits, and then they kind of overgeneralize their experience that everyone has the same predator. No, they're all different. Some of them just have traits of, and maybe they're more reactive and it's automatic and habitual. Other predators are actually hyper intentional, they're aware, and it's really scary. Those are the higher level functioning dark triads. They have year-long manipulation schemes to hurt the victim, and it's fun for them. So here's some examples of narcissistic parent no-win scenarios or double binds. For example, number 1, the narcissistic parent doesn't give you guidance, and then they blame you for all the problems you have in your life, and then they call themselves parent of the year. So they might ask you, how come you're such a failure and you screwed up in life? But they kind of also set you up for that failure by installing an inner critic, constantly fear-mongering you, telling you that you're never safe, physically beating you for making small mistakes, teaching you all the wrong social skills, like using profanity all the time, isolating you from humanity, ensuring that you feel negative emotion all the time, discouraging you from exploring your talents and passion, preventing you from getting higher education and jobs through psychological and emotional abuse. I mean, these are kind of really scary, but other parents, they kind of blame their kids when actually they kind of took some actions to sabotage their children, which is really dark. I told you that's a non-mammal response, because if you even have a mother, let's say you have a mother rat, that's a better parent than a psychopathic or narcissistic dark triad parent, because they will harm their children. They don't care. They're objects. Whereas other mammal species like cats, dogs, etc., they want to ensure that their young succeed, and they kind of have this attachment bond with them, whereas there's no attachment bond with a narcissistic parent. You don't mean anything to them, and they like to fuck with you. Well, at least mine did. The dark triad ones do. Number 2, they destroy all your personal boundaries with punishments. And they might tell you, how come you let everyone walk all over you? You're so pathetic. So this denies a reality that the narcissistic parent is the reason why you have no self-defense against other people, and maybe why you're a people pleaser. Because every time you had a boundary, they physically beat you or they psychologically punished you, so you would feel fear, shame, and guilt. So every time you had a want or a need or a boundary, they punished you to feel all of these negative emotions. So every time you wanted fairness or called out the truth of the situation, you were abused more and more until you didn't talk. And so you never learn to have any self-defense mechanisms against the outside world. That makes you open and vulnerable to other predators. You never have the fight instinct back when someone is hurting you. And then they kind of blame you for that, and they're the one that installed it to you. That's a no-win situation. That's a double bind. That's crazy making. And so they're failing to acknowledge that they have some blame in the matter, but they put all that blame on you. And I think we're social animals. We can't just form our identity by ourselves. It's often reflected back to us by the people we have attachment bonds to. And that's another reason why narcissists are so dangerous. It's because they live in a delusional reality and they want to make you inferior, and they're reflecting back to you like, hey, you're a loser, through either words or mistreatment or abuse, or just the way they label you, the way they see you. And you don't want that to be part of your identity. That's why you kind of need to get them out of your life, because you can't have that type of danger and mischaracterization of you. Number 3, a narcissistic parent may act controlling and permissive at the same time. So that was mostly my mom. She would let me walk home alone at night from like the mall and from school. I would be put in so many dangerous situations, and she just never cared. She completely neglected me, and I didn't realize that as a kid, because I would just be kind of self-sufficient and doing all these things on my own. I didn't know it was dangerous as like a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old. But one of the things that she was very strict about was not letting me go to a friend's house or ever letting a friend stay over. And so I wanted to reconcile those contradictory notions of why she was so controlling and permissive at the same time. And I was able to do that because I realized, oh, she didn't really care about my safety or well-being, because I was in so many dangerous scenarios like all the time. But what she wanted to do was isolate me from friends and other people, because she's an incredibly screwed up person. She knows that, and she puts a nice face onto the world, but she didn't want me to socialize with healthy people, so I would figure out that she's a terrible person. And that's how the isolation works. It's a form of control so that you do not figure out what's going on. Number 4, narcissistic parent might say, you're not independent, you're not responsible enough. However, the parents may be intentionally fostering dependency by purposely not teaching you how to do things so that they can do it for you, and then you have to be dependent on them, and therefore they're able to control you more because you need them. Or they prevent you from learning things, they prevent you from exploring or taking certain jobs or classes, or prevent you from making money and abusing you if you do try to have a job, and then giving you the bare minimums to subsist, and then threatening to take those away when you disobey, and then blame you for being dependent. Is crazy making. Or they might say that you're so disobedient, good children and partners listen, obey. And so if you are listening to them and obeying, then that's not having independent thinking. So that is contradictory. So no matter what you do, you are going to be insulted no matter what. Number 5, the narcissistic parent may define you as bad most of the time, and they say you're not being a good child. However, the way the definitions work for them is kind of opposite. A good child to a narcissistic parent is a child who is an emotional caretaker. It's a parentified child. It's a role reversal. So you as a child have to act like their parent, and your disordered parent can be the irresponsible child who makes all this decision making and choices and gets you to take the blame. And so you don't know what the real role is. It's a role reversal. And so what is the real role of the parent and what is the real role of the child? It's reversed. So anyways, these were a list of some double binds that I had to personally go through, and it was really, really infuriating for me. And I'm pretty sure that you've had a couple no-win scenarios as well. And a lot of these were done to me and some of the people that I talked to. And I think there is a nuanced definition between no-win scenario and double binds, and so I kind of explained that before. I think it could be better explained by someone else. Anyway, so I'm moving on. So there's some false accusations that they may do, and there is an unstated incorrect assumption. So one of the things that was done to me is, it's number 1, why do you enjoy making your mother feel upset? And so if I answer this question in any way, the unstated premise is that I like to hurt my mother. And so that's an incorrect assumption, because, well, most people don't intend to hurt anybody. If you're not a narcissist and you're a regular human being, you probably don't have bad intentions and you want to help people most of the time. And so that's a hard way to answer the question. You kind of just need to not answer it. Number two, suppose I'm your abuser and I say, can't you do anything right? So the unstated premise in this leading question is that you're not doing anything right. And so if you answer the question, it's a no-win for you. And it's incorrect because you've done lots of things right. And so that's like a false accusation embedded in a question. Like one of the most famous examples was, when have you stopped beating your wife? Now that's a leading question that if you answer it assumes that you do beat your wife. And I mean, you might see this like used a lot with predators because they tend to ask questions that are actually false accusations, or they kind of have statements that are false accusations. Number three is more of a manipulation ploy. So if I was your narcissistic partner, I might say, oh, if you loved me, then you would spend our life savings on this new Volkswagen that I want. So this is a manipulation ploy that is a conditional statement. So in this statement, I will define love as a very specific action. You know, you buying me a certain luxury brand car. And if you don't do it, I'm going to say, oh, you don't love me and it harms me. And so it's a very narrow way of defining love, and predators will often put you in that situation. They'll accuse you of being bad and not loving them if you don't do whatever they want. But that also violates your boundaries because I'm spending our joint savings on this new luxury car that I want and I'm not respecting your needs. And so like a lot of them will pull that on you, where like if they'll say, if you love me, if you love family, if you will do whatever they say. So now I'm going to talk about the nuances for regular relationships with non-disordered people, because I think non-disordered people can put their partner and family in a few no-win scenarios and double binds because of the following reasons. So number one, it's because human beings are complicated and they may not consider all the trade-offs. For example, it's common for people to want their partner to feel jealous. This is a previous example that I gave, because they want someone to be in the middle, which is not too possessive or not too controlling, and that kind of can seem crazy making. Number two, they're not self-aware enough about how their wants are contradictory. I mean, I think in terms of romantic relationships, I think Esther Perel talked about this, where she said that you want a certain amount of desire and familiarity and mystery. And so you can't have familiarity and mystery. Those are contradictory things. But I think people within the context of a romantic relationship want those two. They kind of want the benefits of monogamy and the benefits of non-monogamy, which is like excitement and lots of other partners. And so that's an example of how people want everything, but there's trade-offs in life. And so therefore they can set other people up for no-win scenarios. An example at a no-win scenario at work is if you have a boss and they want you to do 5 things, but given the resources and time constraint, it's only humanly possible to do 2. So that's impossible. They kind of set you up for an impossible task. And maybe they might not know this because, you know, they want everything done. And so you have to convey this to the boss and then ask them the priority of what the tasks are, and maybe just do 2 out of 5 because that's humanly possible. And so the difference between regular people and predators is that if you point out the no-win scenario or double bind, the regular person doesn't necessarily rage at you or punish you or abuse you. They may initially have a defensive reaction, but then slowly they accept that contradiction and they negotiate with you. So if I put someone in a no-win scenario and then they brought it up to me, well, I would feel bad and then I would try to correct it. But a predator would rage at you, they would yell at you, they would punish you. You're not even allowed to bring it up because they punished you with so much conditioning that you kind of just are kind of stuck in this crazy cycle where you just lose. If you do A or B, those are the only 2 choices, and you do either of them, you lose and you're bad and you're punished. And so that's a lose-lose scenario. And number 3, why regular people may put people in double binds is that they're not emotionally aware, but they have good intentions, but the outcome of what they want is the opposite effect. I think this happens a lot in relationships. Like, for example, if a parent is really annoyed by a child's behavior, instead of setting a boundary right there and enforcing consequences, maybe that parent is like psychologically triggered and doesn't want to enforce consequences, maybe because they think that they love the child too much and they want to not abuse the child, and so they're like, okay, I'm just going to let my child be really annoying. And so what's happening inside is there's a lot of anger building up and resentment, and maybe the parent maybe want to win approval from the child or people please the child, because that can happen with some codependence. Or they may think that enforcing consequences is cruel, which it's not, because in real life there's cause and effect, and people will experience consequences, and you can't protect your child forever. And so that's kind of more permissive parenting. Excessive unnecessary punishments can be cruel, but if children suffer the consequences of their behavior early on in a safe environment where you can protect them and guide them, it's going to prepare them to be responsible for life, where they really do experience the consequences of their actions. And so because of all this anger that's building up in the parent, that's allowing the child to do whatever they want, if it's misbehaving, if it's annoying, and so the parent will try to hold it in. They're trying to deny their feelings of anger and say, like, no, it's not a big deal. And so they're uncomfortable with feeling angry at the child. Maybe there's a lot of psychological issues going on. And so that parent may have all this pent-up anger, so when the child does something good, they might just lash out, or they might randomly lash out, and the child might not know why. And so that's crazy making for the child, but it was done unintentionally. And so that is a parent who has good intentions, but the outcome, which is the random lashing out, or lashing out when the child is good, is the opposite outcome that they wanted. So that's an example of like how people and relationships are complicated, and that there is a nuance between predators and non-predators, or regular people. So the difference between healthy people is that they're maybe not aware of their actions, they want everything and don't consider all the trade-offs in life, and it's different because the emotional manipulator does these double binds 1,000 times more and is intentional, especially if they're a dark triad personality, and they don't care about you and they don't care about your feelings, whereas a regular person does. So no-win situations remind you that you're always a loser, no matter what, no matter how hard you try. And over time, you're going to internalize this toxic shame and low self-esteem until you're too depressed and demotivated to try. And so when that happens, you end up not taking action on your goals. Because think about it, they're making you feel all this negative emotion. Then you have to distract yourself to emotionally regulate. And it's really hard. So if you're upset, a lot of people distract themselves with like binge watching Netflix, or maladaptive things like maybe drinking, maybe like other destructive things. And so that's going to keep you from attaining your goals, because if you're trying to distract yourself just regulating your basic emotions, so you don't have the emotional baseline to just actually work and be productive and pursue joy and gratitude and all the things that you want in life. So it's really, really destructive. And so the abuser is actively encouraging you to be the loser that they need you to be. You're in the one down position in the relationship. The abuser is superior to you and feels powerful from it. So to me, it's a form of emotional torture, and it makes the victim feel anger, hopeless, panicked, depressed, because no matter what they do, they will be punished and harmed. Humans feel the need to have mastery and competency as a fundamental human drive, and putting them in a lose-lose situation robs them of this opportunity. So people will feel all sorts of negative emotion as a result, ranging from the following. Well, they'll feel shame because they will feel defective, because they feel like they can't accomplish anything, because the abuser is setting them up for impossible things. They give them two choices, A or B, and no matter what they do, the victim is going to be punished or harmed and labeled as a failure. So there's going to be maybe a toxic amount of shame where they just think that they shouldn't exist, or they're just fundamentally wrong, or their existence is wrong. And that's maybe kind of long-term down the road. Maybe that's internalized inside. The second feeling is panic. And so with an abuser, there is an impending doom and sense of punishment sometime in the future if you screw up. And your screw-ups will be unavoidable because you're set up to screw up. You're set up for failure because it's impossible to do. No matter what you do, you're going to be punished. It's A or B, and both times, both outcomes are bad no matter what. And so the person fails, and it's not clearly articulated but emotionally felt that there is going to be some bad thing that's going to happen. It's like an ominous feeling. And so there's going to be a lot of anxiety. And they may not know why or how to pinpoint the source of the anxiety. Then there's going to be a lot of anger because the person is going to feel deeply violated because they're brainwashed into thinking they have choices, a false choice set up from the abuser with A or B, but the false choices all lead to harm and punishment. It's not like you can ever gain their approval. The next feeling is hopelessness. And hopelessness arises when no matter what you do, you can't change the outcome. So you want to give up. That's what a no-win scenario does. A person exerts all of this effort, thousands of hours, and then in the end, they'll be punished no matter what action they take, whether they do something or they don't do something. And that's crazy making. And so the result is, if you take an action or not, you will be punished, you'll feel harmed, you'll feel pain from the abuser. As a result, you may want to give up at all, and maybe it's kind of outside your conscious awareness. It's like, maybe it's a more subconscious form of self-sabotage where you kind of procrastinate and you kind of give up the will to do anything. And in order to be successful, you have to feel motivated. You have to be emotionally regulated, meaning not suffering from too much negative emotion. Because if you have a lot of depression, anger, hopelessness, etc., you're not going to have the energy to act on your goals and dreams. In fact, you may be kind of wasting time regulating your emotions, maybe with excessive alcohol or binge watching Netflix or doing anything else just to make all of your excessive negative emotions just try to go to baseline or even just numb out. And so that is a very dangerous situation the abuser puts you in. It's not like a quantifiable negative thing where it's like if somebody slaps you or breaks your arm, but it's more of an insidious, like intangible thing. But it nonetheless can wreck your life. And that's why these people are super dangerous. And that's not even like the starting point. If you're talking about a dark triad personality, they do way more. So, number 2, as a result, you may suffer from great indecision and anxiety about making the wrong choice out of fear of being berated, so you delay it for a long time. There may be problems with procrastination. And remember, delaying is also an extremely costly choice. Not taking an action is also a choice, and it's an action. And that can be a bad action because a lot of avoidance and procrastination in your life can lead to long-term problems. And so it's a good idea to get hold of your anxiety and kind of realize what's going on in your situation. And maybe some of the anxiety is stemming from the weird no-win scenarios that your abuser is putting you in. Number 3, you may waste a lot of your life trying to please the unpleasable. And so essentially you're set up to do an impossible task. You're kind of set up to chase this carrot on the stick, and it's not attainable. It's like this perfectionism. They kind of hold you to this pedestal that's like unattainable, and you feel bad and you feel like a failure, but you didn't know that the rules of the game were rigged. And so maybe years go by and you spend all of this time trying to please your abuser, and guess what? They still resent you and they still hate you, and then you wasted all this time. Number 4, you may feel excessive negative emotion because that's what no-win scenarios do. They make you feel the host of negative emotions I just explained, and more maybe. And that's going to prevent you from pursuing joy, connection, finding and living your passion, which is what you're supposed to do. And so one of the things that you could do, number 1, is don't play the game. Right now, stop trying to win the abuser's approval, whether it's your partner or parent or friend, because they will never give it to you. And if they do, it's only temporary before they start nitpicking at all your flaws. Sometimes abusers can sense when you're about to leave, and that's when they rein back their criticism and they temporarily replace it with small gifts or bits of kindness here and there and flattery. It's a strategic tool so that they can induce you back into the trauma bond. It's so that they can re-brainwash you into thinking that they care about you, which is false. You're just an object, you're an appliance to them. And sometimes some of them, especially the dark triads, they're really sadistic, so they want to raise you up really high because it's really fun to see you fall. And so that high is kind of an emotional high that you feel, but then when you crash and then they insult you and say that you're nothing, well, you're going to feel deep emotional pain. It's like that fall from grace where you desperately scramble to win their affection again, and they see that on your face and they kind of like that power trip they have over you. And so you need acceptance of the situation. The complete acceptance of the situation is, look, you can never please your abuser. When were they ever happy for you for a long time? Was it temporary? And then the next day or the next hour or week, they were back to berating you and nitpicking your other flaws and putting you in another no-win situation? Haven't you had enough? And so one of the solutions to this is, don't play the game, stop trying to win their approval, know that it's like a rigged game where everything leads to failure. All moves lead to failure, all roads lead to failure, all roads lead to punishment. This is, don't even play. Meaning, go low contact, no contact. Their approval is not worth it. You're set up to be a loser. And so when you give yourself the self-compassion, forgiveness, and acceptance and love that was denied to you, it's going to help you like grow. And so instead of beating yourself up mentally, which is what they want you to do, remember they install that like self-blame in you, you have to take care of yourself like you're someone that is really important and someone that it truly matters, because in reality your life matters. And when you extricate yourself from these abusers and heal, you'll be able to discover what you're great at. You get to define yourself. You can contribute something great to the world. You can change other people's lives. You can have a deep, meaningful, wonderful relationship with somebody who truly cares about you. But you can't do that with your abuser around. They're bringing you down. They're feeding you with negative emotion. They're kind of sabotaging your life in a lot of intangible ways, but it's nonetheless extremely significant. So, number 2, remember that the abuser is going to label you as bad or as a failure no matter what action you take or you don't take. The abuser will label all your successes as failures to keep you in the one down position. They're going to reduce you and your entire humanity to a set of flaws and say that that's all you are. And these are all lies because the abuser doesn't see reality correctly. Remember, they're keeping you around to select you as a target because you are worthwhile. And this is another double bind where abusers say, oh, you're so terrible. Why is the abuser sticking with you? Why did they select you as a target? It's because you are wonderful. You do have good traits. You are worthy to exploit, which was my case, where my parents and all the people in my life, they kept telling me I was so terrible, and then they also put all of these responsibilities on me, and I would have to like kind of do them, or they would punish me, and that was through psychological and emotional manipulation. So I didn't have to do them. So yeah, I let myself be manipulated, but they kind of exploited an attachment bond. I kind of grew up in this dysfunctional family cult where all 3 of them, my brother, my mom, and my dad, were all predators. And so it was really hard to kind of unbrainwash myself and see what was going on. Anyways, so they want you around because you're useful and you're great, even if they're telling you that you're not. And if someone was not useful, they would not be selected and kept around. It's true. I mean, if somebody was like irresponsible and didn't have their shit together, then other people wouldn't be asking them to do stuff. They wouldn't want to keep that person around. They would want to get away from that person. So I know because the abusers in my life, if somebody is really useless and if somebody is like dangerous and annoying or just they really hate that person, abusers will stay away from them. They're not useful. And so they only select useful targets. Number 3, reject the abuser's narrative of the situation and characterization of you. So you have to create your own narrative about what's going on in your relationship and define yourself and define your abuser. Now, you don't have to tell them to their face because they're going to reject facts, okay? Like, they don't live in reality per se, or they like to manipulate you and say that they don't. And so they're going to reject whatever you say. They reject facts. Anyways, the short story you could tell yourself is, the abusers in my life need to feel powerful and superior by needing me to feel inferior, by needing me to be a failure and a loser. They need me to constantly be wrong and fail by nonstop disapproving of my actions and criticizing everything I do. Whatever they say about me, themselves, and the situation is pretty much wrong because they live in a delusional reality in which they're superior, and that's not objective reality because they're not superior. The truth is, I have a bunch of wonderful traits, and they actually believe this about me because they're actually trying to keep me around no matter what negative things they said. They selected me as a target. That means I'm very useful. And so you are wonderful, and you have a lot of good traits, and that's really the true story of you. And you're a great person who does deserve love, compassion, and kindness. And so that's really what's going on in the situation, whereas they're having an alternative narrative where, like, hey, you're a screw up, you can't do anything right, and they're not going to give you their approval. Anyways, so if you enjoyed listening to this, please like and share. Thanks for listening. I hope you're progressing in your healing journey, and take care.